I was looking face to face with Jesus. He kind of looked at me and said, you have to go back now. Doctor comes in, how is this person alive again? And they ran every test they could on my heart after that. Monitors, things I had to wear for 2 weeks, extensive tests, and there is nothing wrong with my heart now. Not then, not now. Whatever happened to me, I was completely healed. I'm already getting goosebumps. As soon as you asked me to start sharing it, the feeling rushes back. So if I'm smiling big while I tell it, it's for good reason. My experience was a beautiful experience. It was in April 1st, 2008. I was in the United States Air Force at the time. I was stationed in Langley in Virginia. And I was young. I was 19 years old, kind of had a chip on my shoulder. I had already been injured. So my left knee was injured pretty bad in a training exercise. And in my head, I kind of already thought, I'm not going to be in the Air Force much longer. Started showing up late for work, which in the military, as you know, is a big no-no. You don't show up late for anything. You got to be 15 minutes early. But in my head, I just thought, well, my lifelong goal, my lifelong dream of being in the military is just kind of gone down the drain. So I was upset. I would say there was a state of depression there of, what am I going to do with my life now? Everything, since I was probably maybe 10 years old, I thought I was, convinced I was going to be in the military my entire life, So sure enough, one of the mornings I was late for work, and my supervisor thought that she was going to catch me in my room, kind of sleeping in and trying to be late on purpose. And she found me unconscious on my floor in my dorm room. They have access to your room. They sent me immediately to the emergency room on base, and they started running a ton of tests on me. They said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to check your blood. And as I was sitting there in that hospital bed, nothing was coming back abnormal. Everything was completely made me look super healthy. So they were very confused why you were laying, passed out on the floor. Of course, there's no hint of drugs or alcohol or anything like that. So they were just kind of scratching their heads, and you could visibly see it on their faces. Why was this 19-year-old guy, and I was in great shape, and didn't make sense. So they said, one of the nurses said, we're going to do a chest x-ray, a mobile one. So we're going to leave the room, we're going to come back with the chest x-ray, and we'll be right back. And that's when my entire life changed. From that moment when she left the room, I just got this. The best way to describe it is if you're ever watching, hospital shows, on TV, where my vision really started to go from left and right, really blurry, double vision, shaky, but calm at the same time. A lot of this is very confusing because I could say something happened fast and slow at the same time, cold and hot. But really, my vision really just started going super shaky. And it was at that time that I started to hear alarms and things going off that I didn't know what was going on. And, it was this sense of confusion, and I've seen this in movies before. What's going on? My eyesight is just kind of going in and out, and nurses and doctors start running in. And I was at the end of the hospital, I was the last bed basically in the hospital room. And so people were almost running into the wall to try to hit the brakes and try to figure out why the alarms were kind of blaring for me. As the nurses and doctors start coming in, they start shouting, they're looking over my body, really confused again, but obviously with panic and confusion. And for me, I started to feel this beautiful sense of calmness, when really for me, maybe the most chaotic seconds or minute of my life just felt incredibly calm and peaceful. When, if something scary happens to me, if I watch a scary movie or somebody jumps out, you remember that scare, but this was just happiness while something bad was happening to me. Somebody sat down to the left of me while this was going on, and the monitor was to the left of my face, while I'm laying down in the bed. And there's somebody just started stroking my left arm, really peacefully, giving me goosebumps. And as a 19-year-old guy at the time, I didn't want some guy, and I knew it was a guy that was stroking my arm. And Instead, it was just this peaceful feeling of love kind of massaging my arm, and a voice, a booming voice, while everybody is shouting and alarms are going off. I hear this voice say, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it." And he's just continually stroking my arm. I try to look over in that chaos to look to my left, and I'm prevented. It doesn't allow me to look over, to my left, and he won't let me see him. And he says, in all this chaos, he calmly says, "There's going to be a lot of pain going up your arm. There's air going up to your heart, and it's going to cause you a lot of pain, but everything's going to be okay." And in that moment, I start to look at the nurses and doctors above me, and they're watching me die. And that's not a facial expression anybody can mimic, right? You can show that you're scared. You can show that you're happy. Somebody can make a confused face, but to watch somebody watch you die is a scary moment. And instead, when that should have been scary, I just felt like everything was going to be okay. And I was confident in that. And at the last second, I tried to turn over again. The pain shooting up my arm, I kind of described as like a silver bullet, going up my arm. It was very painful. And I can remember that pain to this day. What had happened was it was an air embolism. Air had accidentally, I guess, traveled up my IV and was traveling directly to my heart to stop my heart. So I look over to my left one more time to try to get a glimpse of who's stroking my arm. And at that moment, that hospital monitor went completely flat. And I watched myself die. And I get teary-eyed talking about it because that's a very scary thing to admit. And in that moment was the most peaceful and beautiful moment of my life. I just remember it was like ice pouring out of my heart, my chest. And when my heart should have been in pain, it felt like the most cooling, beautiful sensation, like ice water, really. On a hot day, it felt so beautiful. And from that moment, my body started to travel upwards. And it wasn't a tunnel, maybe like some other people suggest. For me, it was like I was being spun up almost like a tornado, because it was just like things circling around me, these beautiful, I would describe them as angels, just things of light. And there was like laughter and music, and the music, it's hard to explain, but it was like bells, like almost like church bells kind of ringing around. And before I knew it, I was looking at the most beautiful garden ever. Hard to describe because we just don't have colors. We have beautiful greens, and these were like vivid, very vivid colors that you just can't, I wish I could paint them, and I can't. And I was looking at this garden, and there was just plants and trees. It was just a nice feeling, a place. And I remember seeing somebody with a robe, a gentleman with a robe, and there was a little boy with curly blonde hair, little red, almost, so blonde it was like red and curly. And for anybody not watching the video that's listening to the podcast, I have dark brown hair, right? So I watched this gentleman and this kid, and they're playing out in this little garden. And before I know it, my feet are planted, and I can remember the feeling of being planted in the dirt and feeling the blades of grass on my feet. And so there wasn't a sense of, in a dream, it's hard because in a dream you can remember things, but you don't necessarily feel things. That's the expression, pinch me, I must be dreaming. I remember my feet being buried into the dirt. And I'm watching this gentleman play with this little boy, and the little boy is very cheeky. He's like running away and looking back like, oh, I'm getting away from you. You can't catch me. And there's just this beautiful relationship between the man and the little boy. And as I get closer, I start to realize that that's me, that I'm that little boy. Up until I was about 5 years old, I had like golden, blonde hair. And for whatever reason, it's changed to dark brown now. And I start to look, and as I'm looking at the little boy having the time of his life, playing and laughing, the gentleman in the white robe turns to me, and I am just stunned, because without question, without not knowing, for me, it was Jesus. And I say that because I hesitate, because he's not who I grew up looking at, right? It wasn't the picture, or if you go to church and you see somebody on an altar, or photos, or sculptures. He didn't look like that to me, but without a single doubt, as sure as that your left hand is definitely your left hand and your right hand is your right hand, I was looking face to face with Jesus. And without getting too off track, at that time, maybe the day before I died while I was in the military, if you had said, "Hey, Chase, if you die tomorrow, who are you going to see in heaven?" I probably would not have said, I'm gonna come to face with Jesus. I would have said, I'm going to run into Elvis Presley, going to have milk and cookies. It really wasn't predetermined that that's what I was going to see. We shared almost a communication where we were talking without sharing words verbally. I'm sure he didn't speak English, right? That's what I speak. So, we're sharing this conversation and I'm learning all these details, and without sharing like verbal words, noises, he kind of looks at me and says, go back and share love, laughter, and light and joy. And I look at that little boy, and he was having the time of his life. And my lesson while I was there was to find laughter. Finding joy is so underrated, right? All of us live really busy lives. And, you think of people that work a 9-to-5 job, it's really hard for them to find a lot of laughter while they're at work. And that's the biggest lesson I took. So without really time to say anything else to him, he kind of looked at me and said, you have to go back now. And I was okay with that. As beautiful as this place was, the garden, seeing me as a little boy, having this conversation with Jesus, I was ready to go back, because I felt like I had a lot more to prove and a lot more to share and to teach, and to just more things to love that I didn't appreciate while I was, originally on the earth. And before I knew it, I was back in my body. Now, I woke up and I thought at first it was a dream. I tried opening up my eyes, and, if you're having a great dream, you close your eyes again and go, oh, just one more minute. But once I realized it wasn't a dream and I had to be back in my body, I opened up my eyes, and it didn't take long for me to realize that I was no longer on the Air Force Base where I died. Nobody was wearing uniforms. Everybody was normally wearing a uniform or camouflage, or we call them BDUs back then. And I realized I don't know where I am. I'm in a hospital room, but I was not connected to anything. I think back, if somebody dies of an air embolism, really a cardiac arrest, you're going to have that person hooked up to all different contraptions and IVs. And I realized that the Air Force, in order to not pronounce me dead on base, they sent me to a civilian hospital. And that's where I woke up. And so I was essentially pronounced dead off base. So the military didn't have to take credit for that. And yeah, I woke up on a civilian hospital. A nurse eventually came in, and it was just a really blank room. There was really nothing going on in that room. And she kind of just said, I'm going to go get the doctor. Ran and got the doctor. Doctor comes in, and I'm sure, looking back now, I really wish I could remember more of that moment, but I'm sure he's thinking, what the heck? How is this person alive again? And they said, we don't know what else to tell you. We're just going to send you back to the Air Force Base for more testing, because you're their responsibility. And so sure enough, they cut me loose from the hospital. They said I was free to leave. And like any 19-year-old would do after they just died, I said, I want to go out to dinner. I'm going to go hang out with my friends, and I'm not going back to the hospital. And so eventually, a couple of days later, I went back to the hospital. They ran every test they could on my heart after that. Monitors, things I had to wear for 2 weeks, extensive tests, and there's nothing wrong with my heart now. Not then, not now. Whatever happened to me, I was completely healed. I went on a retreat with a veterans organization, and something about that that retreat opened up everything for me. Came back, and within a day of coming back, my life completely changed for the better. And I just felt like I finally found my purpose to really start sharing my story with more people. So I was medically retired out of the Air Force, like a permanent retirement. And so I was given a second chance at life, I feel like. You know, I was young, and I could really have done anything I wanted, and I did. So anything that I wanted to do when I was a little kid, anything that influenced me, I knew I was going to go back and try those things. So for example, I was really into photography. So I invested in a really nice camera, became a photographer, shot weddings for people, got to do stuff, got put in a magazine, really, really cool. And then I said, you know what? People always said I was funny growing up. I want to be a comedian. I got to perform comedy, and I went through and I got to headline a show, at a really nice comedy club. And then I stopped. I remember thinking breakdancing was cool. There was this old movie called Breakin'. So I joined a breakdancing club at a local university. I didn't even go to that university, but I just, searched online and became a breakdancer. We got to do performances, and people would look and go, "How old are you?" And I would tell them my age, and they'd be like, "Look at your resume. You're this, you've done DJing, you're a photographer, breakdancer, comedian, And I wouldn't slow down. For better or for worse, at the time, I just was on I guess you could say on a tear to just do everything that interests me. If my heart stops again and I go back up again, I did everything I loved. I'm so fulfilled. I loved everything. I loved people. I loved things that I thought were cool, and to me, that's what passion is about, and chasing the light. I believe that there's always somebody to talk to that you can't see or hear or feel maybe. It's not just about Christianity. I believe that if you are of a Native American background, if you're Buddhist, Islamic, if you're atheist, whatever you believe in, whatever kind of presence you have, that something that is out there that you want to strive to work towards, I believe that you can talk to those people or beings. So yes, I can communicate often. I try to, but for those of listeners that say, I just can't break through it, just know that they are listening and that they are always here to help. Nobody in heaven or in any other realm wants to see anybody suffer. That's never, ever the case. So just stay positive and know that just because you can't see them right now doesn't mean they're not there. So the closest I've ever seen, which to me is like a photograph image, it was drawn by this, she was very young at the time. Her name was, I don't want to pronounce it wrong, so somebody, it's Akian, or Akiani, I believe her name is, a young girl. And so for me, he had tight brown curly hair. It was short, and he had these stark green eyes, chiseled jaw, was super tanned, he was a tanned gentleman. And but the eyes to me were the kindest eyes I've ever seen. They had wrinkles in the side from laughing and smiling. And I remember that standing out to me, just regular, like pierced lips and just, maybe from what I can remember, like 9 inches in height. That painting that she did was 100% what he looked like to me. So when I still see that painting, I get the tear in my eye. I get a little overwhelmed because, it kind of takes my breath away of the beauty of that feeling that I had while I was in heaven. So people who are afraid of death, just know that my experience was really beautiful. My experience taught me that there's nothing to be afraid of, but while you're here, do everything you can to smile, and you'll feel so much better when that time comes. And if you have somebody, let's say in your family, if you have a parent or a sibling or a close friend who is, aging, getting older, or who is sick, just be there for them in that moment. And as hard as it is to say it, because I don't want to be a hypocrite, because if I lose my parents, I know I'm going to be heartbroken, even knowing what I know. But just know in your heart and in the back of your mind that they're always going to be there. And you have a chance to be closer with them than you ever were before. Just close your eyes, talk to them, ask them for signs, but be willing to see the signs. If you say, I really miss you, can you show me a butterfly soon? Look for butterflies. Maybe you haven't seen a butterfly in weeks. If a butterfly pops up, don't go, that's just coincidence. Just appreciate that moment and go, thank you. I know you're with me now. I get butterflies because I do that all the time. I don't try to quiz or test relatives or angels and go, prove it that you're here. What I do is say, hey, if you're around and you can hear me, I would love to just get a sign. And I always know when that sign comes, I'm 100% certain. I laugh to myself. I probably, if I'm out in public, I probably look like a lunatic, right? But I'm able to find those beautiful symbols around when I ask for them. And I just say, don't get disappointed if you don't see them, because they probably are there. You just might not be seeing them yourself. So don't be afraid of death, but do embrace being here on earth and making the best of it every day.